The birth of the United States. Welcome to The Birth of Nations, a series that uncovers the captivating stories behind the creation of modern nations. Each episode takes you on a journey through the events, struggles, and triumphs that gave rise to the nations we know today. In this first episode, we explore the extraordinary story of the United States. How did 13 British colonies unite to overthrow one of the most powerful empires in the world? How did they create a nation founded on the ideals of freedom, equality, and democracy? This is a tale of revolution, resilience, and the birth of a new way of governance. Through this episode, we will delve into three pivotal moments: the American Revolution, the drafting of the Declaration of Independence, and the formation of the United States Constitution. Each of these events laid the foundation for a nation that would inspire the world. Before we begin, we invite you to support this journey. If you enjoy this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Share your thoughts on how we can improve, and let us know what nations you'd like us to cover in future episodes. Your feedback and support help us create better content for you. Now let's step back into the mid-18th century, a time of rising tensions and bold ideas. This is the story of how the United States was born. Chapter 1. The Roots of Revolution. The story of the United States begins in the mid-18th century, when 13 British colonies stretched along the eastern coast of North America. These colonies were thriving hubs of commerce, agriculture, and culture, yet they remained under the control of the British Crown, more than 3,000 miles away. Colonial life was defined by hard work and a strong sense of community. The colonies were diverse, home to settlers of English, Dutch, German, and other European origins. Despite their differences, they shared one thing in common: a growing frustration with British rule. The relationship between the colonies and Britain began to sour in the 1760s. To recover from the costly 7 Years' War, Britain imposed a series of taxes on the colonies. The Stamp Act, Sugar Act, and Tea Act enraged colonists, who had no representation in the British Parliament. This gave rise to a rallying cry that would echo through history: no taxation without representation. The colonists did not remain silent. Protests erupted across the colonies, ranging from boycotts of British goods to open acts of defiance, such as the Boston Tea Party. In 1770, the Boston Massacre further inflamed tensions, as British soldiers killed 5 unarmed colonists during a protest. Amid rising tensions, colonial leaders began to realize the need for unity. In 1774, representatives from 12 of the 13 colonies met in Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress. For the first time, they discussed coordinated actions against British policies, planting the seeds of a united American identity. The final spark came in April 1775, when British troops marched to seize colonial weapons stored in Concord. At Lexington, they were met by local militias. The first shots were fired, later known as the shot heard round the world, marking the beginning of the American Revolution. Chapter 2. The American Revolution, 1775–1783. The year is 1775, and the colonies have reached a breaking point. The battles of Lexington and Concord mark the beginning of a war unlike any other. 13 colonies, with no formal army, no navy, and limited resources, rise to challenge the British Empire, the most powerful military force in the world. Following the outbreak of war, the colonies knew they needed to formalize their efforts. The Second Continental Congress convened in May 1775 to discuss the next steps. One of their first acts was to establish the Continental Army and appoint George Washington, a respected Virginian, as its leader. Washington's leadership would prove critical to uniting the colonies and turning scattered militias into a fighting force. The early days of the war were marked by struggle and defeat for the Continental Army. At the Battle of Long Island in 1776, Washington's forces were soundly beaten, and they barely escaped across the East River under the cover of night. These early losses highlighted the immense challenges facing the colonies: a lack of funding, supplies, and experienced troops. Despite early setbacks, the colonies began to turn the tide. The winter of 1777–1778 at Valley Forge was a crucible for the Continental Army. Under the training of Prussian officer Baron von Steuben, the ragtag force emerged stronger and more disciplined. The turning point came with the Battle of Saratoga in 1777, where American forces, led by General Horatio Gates, defeated British General Burgoyne's army. This victory convinced France to enter the war as an ally, providing critical military and financial support. France's entry into the war in 1778 was a game-changer. French troops, led by the Marquis de Lafayette, and a powerful French navy, provided the support the colonies desperately needed. Spain and the Netherlands also joined the fight, weakening Britain by opening new fronts in Europe and the Caribbean. The American Revolution became a global conflict, straining British resources and tipping the balance in favor of the colonies. By 1781, the war had shifted to the southern colonies. The British strategy of gaining loyalist support in the south failed as American forces, led by Nathanael Greene and Daniel Morgan, won crucial victories at battles like Cowpens. The final blow came at Yorktown, Virginia, where Washington's army, supported by French troops and a naval blockade, trapped British General Cornwallis. On October 19, 1781, Cornwallis surrendered, effectively ending the war. While the fighting ended in 1781, the war was not officially over until 1783. In Paris, American diplomats, including Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and John Jay, negotiated peace with Britain. The Treaty of Paris recognized the United States as an independent nation and granted it significant territory, stretching from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi River. Chapter 3. Declaring Independence. By 1776, the colonies were engulfed in rebellion, and the idea of independence, once unthinkable, began to take hold. The path to independence was not just a reaction to British oppression, it was a bold decision to redefine governance and human rights for the future. Even as war raged, many colonists were hesitant about severing ties with Britain. However, voices like Thomas Paine's changed public opinion. In January 1776, Paine published Common Sense, a powerful pamphlet that argued for independence and denounced monarchy as oppressive and outdated. Its clear and direct language resonated deeply, spreading revolutionary fervor across the colonies. At the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia, the debate over independence reached a tipping point. On June 7, 1776, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia introduced a resolution declaring, "These united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states." Despite fierce debate, the colonies realized that independence was the only way forward. With Lee's resolution gaining momentum, a committee was formed to draft a formal declaration. The task fell largely to Thomas Jefferson, a young Virginian known for his eloquence. In just 17 days, Jefferson penned the document that would become the Declaration of Independence, blending Enlightenment ideals with the colonists' grievances against King George III. The Declaration of Independence was more than a statement of rebellion. It was a declaration of universal principles. Drawing on Enlightenment thinkers, Jefferson articulated the idea that all men are created equal and endowed with unalienable rights. These ideals challenged the very foundation of monarchy and inspired movements for freedom worldwide. On July 4, 1776, the Continental Congress officially adopted the Declaration of Independence. The signing was an act of incredible courage. Each signer knew they were committing treason against Britain. As Benjamin Franklin famously said, "We must all hang together, or assuredly we shall all hang separately." The declaration was met with jubilation in the colonies as it formalized their struggle for freedom. Copies were distributed and read aloud in town squares, uniting the colonies under a common purpose. However, it also enraged Britain, which escalated its military efforts to crush the rebellion. The Declaration of Independence remains one of the most influential documents in history. Its ideals have inspired revolutions and movements for equality across the globe. From the abolition of slavery to the fight for civil rights, the Declaration's principles continue to shape the course of human history. Chapter 4. Building a Nation, the U.S. Constitution. With independence won, the colonies faced an enormous challenge: building a functional government. The Articles of Confederation, the nation's first attempt at governance, proved too weak to manage a growing and divided country. The United States needed a new framework, a system that could unite the states while balancing power and protecting individual freedoms. Adopted during the Revolutionary War, the Articles of Confederation gave most power to individual states and left the federal government powerless. It couldn't levy taxes, regulate trade, or enforce laws. This lack of authority became painfully clear during events like Shays' Rebellion, when farmers in Massachusetts rose up against crushing debt and taxes. The government's inability to respond highlighted the urgent need for reform. In May 1787, delegates from 12 states gathered in Philadelphia to address the nation's growing crisis. Officially tasked with revising the Articles of Confederation, they soon realized that an entirely new system was needed. Over the course of 4 months, these men, known as the Founding Fathers, debated, argued, and compromised to create the framework of a new government. Creating the Constitution was no easy task. Delegates fiercely debated key issues. How should states be represented in Congress? Larger states wanted representation based on population, while smaller states demanded equal representation. The Great Compromise resolved this by creating a bicameral legislature, the House of Representatives, based on population, and the Senate, with equal representation for each state. The issue of slavery also loomed large. Northern and southern states clashed over whether enslaved people should count toward a state's population. The 3/5 compromise counted 3 out of every 5 enslaved individuals for both representation and taxation purposes, a decision that would have lasting consequences. The Constitution established a government based on 3 branches: the legislative, executive, and judicial. This separation of powers, along with a system of checks and balances, ensured that no single branch could dominate. The document also defined the powers of the federal government while reserving certain rights for the states. Once the Constitution was drafted, it needed to be ratified by at least 9 of the 13 states. This sparked intense debate between Federalists, who supported the Constitution, and Anti-Federalists, who feared it gave too much power to the federal government. To address these concerns, Federalists like Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay wrote the Federalist Papers, a series of essays explaining and defending the Constitution. To gain broader support, the Federalists agreed to add a Bill of Rights, safeguarding individual liberties. These first 10 amendments to the Constitution guaranteed freedoms such as speech, religion, and the press, and protected citizens from government overreach. The Bill of Rights became a cornerstone of American democracy. Ratified in 1788, the Constitution became the supreme law of the land, providing a framework that has guided the United States for over 2 centuries. Its principles of democracy, rule of law, and individual rights have inspired countless nations and remain a testament to the vision of the Founding Fathers. Chapter 5. The First Years of a New Nation. With independence secured and a new constitution in place, the United States stood at a crossroads. The first years of the new nation were filled with both promise and uncertainty. How would this fragile union navigate its challenges and chart a course for its future? In 1789, George Washington became the first president of the United States, setting the standard for all future leaders. As the only unanimously elected president, Washington symbolized unity and trust during a time when the nation was still finding its footing. Under his leadership, the first administration established key elements of governance, including the creation of executive departments, state, treasury, and war, which formed the foundation of the president's cabinet. The young nation faced significant economic challenges, including war debt and the need for a stable currency. Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of the Treasury, introduced a bold financial plan to address these issues. His plan included consolidating state and federal debts, creating a national bank, and implementing tariffs to promote domestic industry. While his policies sparked intense debate, they laid the groundwork for America's financial stability and economic growth. Despite efforts to unify the nation, domestic tensions soon arose. In 1791, the federal government imposed a tax on whiskey to generate revenue, sparking outrage among farmers in western Pennsylvania. This unrest culminated in the Whiskey Rebellion of 1794, where armed protesters challenged federal authority. In a decisive moment, President Washington personally led troops to suppress the rebellion, demonstrating the federal government's ability to enforce its laws and maintain order. As the nation navigated its early challenges, ideological divisions began to take shape, leading to the formation of political parties. Federalists, led by Alexander Hamilton, advocated for a strong central government and industrial growth, while Democratic Republicans, led by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, championed states' rights and an agrarian society. These differing visions for America's future would define its political landscape for decades to come. In the 1790s, the young nation also faced pressure from foreign powers. Britain and France, embroiled in their own conflicts, sought to pull the United States into their struggles. Determined to avoid war, Washington issued the Proclamation of Neutrality in 1793, asserting America's commitment to peace and non-involvement. This decision allowed the United States to focus on internal development, though it drew criticism from those who sympathized with France's revolutionary cause. Amidst political and economic challenges, Americans began forging a national identity. Symbols of unity, such as the American flag and the 4th of July, became deeply ingrained in the nation's culture. Artists, writers, and thinkers contributed to a growing sense of pride and identity, helping to define what it meant to be American. In 1796, George Washington made the unprecedented decision to step down after 2 terms, setting the stage for a peaceful transfer of power. In his farewell address, he urged Americans to avoid political factionalism and entangling alliances, offering wisdom that resonates to this day. John Adams succeeded Washington as president, proving that the new system of government could endure leadership transitions without violence or upheaval. The first years of the United States were a test of its resilience, vision, and ability to adapt. From establishing governance to navigating political and economic challenges, the new nation proved that its revolutionary ideals could endure. But this was only the beginning of its story. Conclusion: through struggle, vision, and resilience, the United States emerged as a nation founded on the ideals of liberty, equality, and democracy. From the first rebellious acts of defiance against British rule to the hard-fought revolution, the bold Declaration of Independence, and the creation of a lasting constitution, this journey was nothing short of extraordinary. The legacy of America's founding is not confined to its borders. Its ideals of self-governance, human rights, and the rule of law have inspired movements for freedom and equality across the globe. These principles continue to guide and challenge societies, reminding us of the enduring power of unity and determination in shaping the future. What can we learn from the birth of the United States? How do these events and ideals resonate in today's world? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspectives. If you enjoyed this journey through history, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life. Let us know what nations or events you'd like us to explore in future episodes of The Birth of Nations. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. In our next episode, we'll travel across the Atlantic to explore the birth of modern France, a story of revolution, passion, and the fight for liberty. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep uncovering the stories that define us.